Welcome everybody to the Captain Spot. I'm your host Justin Freeman. 6'1", 275 pounds of fantasy knowledge. And boy, when I tell you we got a good one tonight, I'm not kidding. We have got an AFC Championship game preview. The two best teams in the league, Baltimore Ravens, Kansas City Chiefs. The game is in Baltimore, looking at a 54-point total. The Ravens at home favored by 3.5 over Mahomes and the Chiefs. This looks like really the game of the week, no doubt about it. I'm really excited to watch it without DFS, but we get to play Showdown on top of that, so this is going to be extra awesome. Quick, before we hop into the slate too deeply, reminder to go check out CaptainSpot.com. That's CPTSpot.com. You pick up a copy of my ebook, written by myself, Brian Jester, Chris Rooney. We cover everything possible you could ever imagine about Showdown DFS all in one place for $34.99. You can't beat that. And thanks for tuning in here on Maya Media Network, but you can also find my Thursday night and Sunday night football shows over on my personal YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/thecptspot. So go check that out over there on YouTube. Subscribe in both places, support the brand, and we'll get you this good content each and every week here on Maya Media Network every Monday. But enough about me. Saints and Chiefs. We've got an awesome slate. Let's hop right into it. Let's look at the pricing. Obviously, at the top of the leaderboard here, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, two best quarterbacks in football. They earn their salary. $13,000 for Lamar Jackson, $12,000 for Patrick Mahomes. It's honestly tough to imagine both these guys not being in a winning lineup, but those prices are really difficult. We're going to have to get really specific and thinking about how these combinations are going to fit together. We know that, we're talking about shootouts. These are not really great opportunities to leave a ton of money on the table. We're going to need every dollar we can get to go after and attack these guys and jam in as much talent into our lineup as possible. If we're looking at the Ravens side of the football, the weapons for the Ravens are much more affordable than the weapons for the Chiefs. Marquise Brown is the most expensive Raven that you can get your hands on other than Lamar Jackson. He'll only cost you $8,400. Mark Andrews will cost you $8,000. So that's two relatively cheaper ways to get some exposure there as part of the Baltimore passing attack. Meanwhile, the top two options on the Kansas City side of the ball behind Patrick Mahomes are going to be Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Kelce will cost you $10,000, Tyreek Hill $9,200. So I think we have to start by thinking, how are we projecting this game to flow? And I should also quickly warn you on possible injury news regarding Sammy Watkins. We're expecting both these teams to come in at relatively full strength, but Sammy Watkins is currently still in the concussion protocol as of the time of this recording. But, what happens around him could free up some value for us later in the way we're looking at the Chiefs side of the football. But we know this offense flows through Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill in the passing game. However, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be priced just under that tier of guys at $7,800. He's going to be a really interesting way to get a broad piece of this pie, especially in lineups where we can't get Patrick Mahomes. Clyde Edwards-Helaire becomes really interesting, but we're going to make it a really strong point to try to get Jackson and Mahomes in this lineup. We may not be able to captain one, but we can likely still get both of them in there to secure that. What are two of the best floor-ceiling combos in the league? So what does it look like for how the Chiefs would pass the ball against the Ravens? We know they're really talented, really across the board on defense, but especially at the cornerback position. So I think for that reason, it makes sense to consider Travis Kelce as a superior option over Tyreek Hill this week. You likely can only go with one of them, especially if you are trying to get Jackson and Mahomes in the same lineup. On the Ravens side of the football, picking between Brown and Andrews can be relatively tough because we typically only see so many Lamar Jackson pass attempts. How many pass attempts do we project for Lamar in a single game is significantly less than many other quarterbacks because A, he rushes the ball a ton, and B, he's super efficient, which means that we don't project a lot of dropbacks. That means that we don't project a lot of targets for anybody in that offense. But those targets are going to be of such a high quality that they're basically worth 2x what some other quarterbacks are throwing. So, I think obviously Brown and Andrews both clearly viable this week, but Andrews is the guy I feel more confident with week in, week out, and a guy we're looking for guys who can make some noise in the red zone, score touchdowns, and that's Mark Andrews' specialty. I think he'd do a great job there. Looking at some of the running back options, we mentioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire and how he gives you a little bit of that dual dynamic there in the passing game and in the rushing game. He sort of had a tale of two games here through these first 2 weeks. First week came out, saw very few targets, but got a ton of rushing work and looked amazing, broke 100 yards. In his second game, got a ton of targets and not a ton of work on the ground as the Chiefs played from behind against the Chargers. So, overall, we've seen Edwards-Helaire get his opportunities in a variety of ways, and that's really encouraging. That's establishes a floor that we don't get from, say, Mark Ingram, starting running back on the Baltimore side of the football. $6,800 for Ingram, so he is $1,000 cheaper, but Ingram possesses a much lower floor than Edwards-Helaire does. That does not mean Edwards-Helaire is guaranteed to outscore Mark Ingram. However, I like the way that Edwards-Helaire can be a part of both the passing and the rushing offense. And we've seen Mark Ingram be really successful near the red zone in terms of receiving ability, and that could continue to be the case. But there is a much lower floor, and we are trying to establish some semblance of floor across the board. And I think we're going to have to look for some ceiling opportunities in some of our cheaper areas here. And as we look at where we can spend some of that mid-range salary, J.K. Dobbins pops up at $5,600. And based on what we've seen from J.K. Dobbins in terms of usage these first 2 weeks, I personally believe that is too much of a price tag for Dobbins. We're still continuing to see 3 running backs used with a high degree of consistency there in Baltimore. That's Mark Ingram, that's Gus Edwards, and then it's J.K. Dobbins. So I'm not interested in playing the third head of a 3-headed monster at $5,600. Sammy Watkins will cost you $5,000. That's a really, really inexpensive way to get a piece of the Chiefs' passing game. He's going to pair well with Kelsey, so you probably are not going to want to have Hill and Watkins there together. Watkins and Kelsey will be able to operate and win in different areas of the field and don't tend to cannibalize each other quite as much. Mecole Hardman is a guy who would get a big boost should Sammy Watkins miss time. Hardman will cost you $4,600 and clearly has that ceiling that we are looking for, but has a pretty scary floor. I'd be much more interested in the floor offered by Demarcus Robinson, who will only cost you $3,000 in this particular matchup. So, overall, there's potentially some value opening up, especially if Sammy Watkins misses, but we're probably going to have to get creative with some of those lower-priced Chiefs receivers. Now, on the Baltimore side, as we look beyond the more obvious options there and look at some of those tertiary options, Miles Boykin stands out to me at a price tag of $3,400. You can get Snead for $4,400, but I prefer Boykin straight up, and he's only $3,400. I like that. He's an extremely athletic guy, and the targets are starting to catch up to him. So Boykin's becoming more and more a part of the offense, becoming a stable part there. I like him. And then I should also say that I think both defenses are really interesting this week. They're priced way down. The Ravens defense, $3,800. Chiefs defense, $2,600. Now, I know you may say, well, you just told me this game has a 54-point total. That's ridiculous to even consider playing a defense. And, well, I'd say, yeah, you're probably pretty close to right. But think about how defenses tend to score fantasy points. It almost always has nothing to do with the amount of points allowed. Like, sure, points allowed are part of the calculation. However, let's not assume that shutouts are happening with any relative degree of frequency. Like the more baseline assumption to make is that your team allows, let's say, 20 points, and that's going to give you a fantasy point outcome on defense of exactly 1. So if we say 1 as our baseline, then we start thinking, well, how do defenses score points? Well, it's sacks, turnovers, and touchdowns off of those turnovers. The turnovers can be relatively random. So embracing that variance and knowing that these two teams may have to drop back a bit more than they're traditionally used to, given the nature of the way we expect this game to go, the defense can give up a boatload of points and still, register a pick 6 and end up in your winning lineup, especially when we're talking about price tags of like $2,600. Like that may be a higher ceiling than playing somebody like Gus Edwards. it's possible. Gus Edwards can fall into the end zone, so perhaps not the best example. But let me talk about a few more of these cheap options here. Yeah, Gus Edwards is $1,600. He is viable. Darrell Williams is the backup running back for Kansas City. He's $2,000. I don't think he's quite viable yet because we're anticipating a second string split backfield between Darrell Williams and Darwin Thompson. Darrell Williams appears to be healthy, but Thompson, registered quite a few snaps last week after Darrell Williams got hurt. So overall, you're going to have to get creative with some of the names at the bottom of this list if you want to play some of the names at the top. And salary is going to be a really big constraint for how we get there. So make sure we're familiar with all these guys. Nick Boyle, a guy who's on the field plenty, but doesn't see a ton of targets, could pay off with his $800 salary there in the end zone. So overall, we're going to get really deep, guys, but I think you have the information you need now. Let's hop into our captain assignment allocation and make sure we're understanding how we get there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is my favorite captain of the week. We run 10,000 simulations here, and you can see that he is the winning captain in, over 1,800 of them. So that's a pretty good rate there for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's followed up by Lamar Jackson, who, we typically don't see a lot of quarterback captain lineups, but Lamar Jackson's certainly a rule breaker there. Given the way he scores his fantasy points. Travis Kelce, next man up, followed by Tyreek Hill. They're really kind of neck and neck there, that Lamar Jackson, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill tier, followed by a pretty big drop-off in Patrick Mahomes. So, Lamar Jackson definitely has a much easier way to get to captain without making somebody else the captain, as opposed to, say, Patrick Mahomes. And hopefully that makes sense based on the way that they accumulate their points. And that Patrick Mahomes typically is paying off another receiver every time that he succeeds. That's why you'll see both his primary pass catchers as better captain options than him, Kelce and Hill. So behind that is Sammy Watkins, Marquise Brown, Demarcus Robinson, Miles Boykin, Mark Andrews. And that'll pretty much cut it there for our captains. Next, let's look at our regular flex appearances. And there you'll see our two quarterbacks rising straight up to the top. You've got to try to find a way to get Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in your lineup. Hopefully, if you got Edwards-Helaire there at captain, you've got enough salary freed up to maybe play one more star player and then find two more cheap guys that you like. Some of the cheap guys that are standing out are Miles Boykin and Demarcus Robinson. They're going to rank really highly there in terms of our flex allocation. You also see some names like Nick Boyle, Willie Snead, and then the Chiefs defense. Obviously we believe the Ravens defense is superior to the Chiefs defense. However, the Chiefs defense is probably the cheaper of the two options and could have a really good situation on their hands should things get out of control. So I think you got all the information you need, guys. We see how these simulations are going to run out. We know exactly how this game script's going to play out. It's going to be a high-scoring affair, and we're going to be ready for it. We're going to try to prioritize getting those quarterbacks in the lineup. We know they're going to be a major piece, and we're not going to leave too much money on the table this week. So I am Justin Freeman. You can find me on Twitter at JustinFreeman18. Once again, make sure you are subscribing to the Captain Spot YouTube channel, youtube.com/thecptspot. You can find it right there. You can go check out captainspot.com. That's cptspot.com. For all your showdown needs, guys. And I hope everybody has a great Monday Night Football here in Week 3. I'll see you guys next week where we talk Week 4. See you guys.